Hey everybody, Bruce here with Traveling with Bruce. Welcome to my channel today. Today's video, well, it's all about how cruise lines are trying to survive the virus shutdown. Today's date, April the 20th, 2020. And I was looking at my channel today, which I do from time to time, and I noticed that the first time I mentioned anything about this global pandemic situation was back on January the 22nd. Almost 2 months ago. Is that right? January, February, March? 3 months ago. 3 months ago, I started talking about this topic, and I'm still covering it because so much has happened from that moment until today, and there'll be much more happening going forward. I thought I would do a quick overview for you guys to kind of give you an idea of just what the cruise lines started to do and have been doing since to find a way to make it through to the other side. A lot of us, of course, are cruise addicts. It's why you guys watch me. It's why I'm on YouTube. I love cruising. But I don't think we're going to be cruising for a while. I think we all know that. And the question will be, well, just who will we be cruising with when the time comes to take our next cruise? Will these cruise lines still be around? And will they be gone? I mean, what's happening here? Unbelievable changes. Now, I have to say thank you, all of you out there who are subscribing to my channel, Traveling with Bruce. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. The following has been growing mightily the last several months. Also, those of you giving my video updates thumbs ups, I really appreciate it. And of course, your comments. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on my videos and any news you think I should know about. By all means, you keep me posted. Thanks also to those of you who are following me on my Facebook group page called Traveling with Bruce, spelled with 2 L's. If you want to hang out with a bunch of my fellow viewers on this channel, head over to the Facebook group page, ask to join. I'll let you in. I'm the administrator, and welcome to the club. And also, one last thing, Jennifer and I are handling the Instagram page for Traveling with Bruce. A lot of you have joined us there, over 750 of you now. Unbelievable. Jennifer is running the page, and we're having a great time there. Thank you all for following and supporting TWB. While I'm talking to you on this video, I'm watching my TV right now and looking at the Dow under tremendous pressure and the markets under pressure, and I'm noticing even the price of oil, which has a contract that expires tomorrow, is now trading negative $11 a barrel. That's never happened before. How can something trade negative $11 a barrel? Well, you know, when you have to take physical delivery of a product and you have nowhere to put it, you basically pay someone else to take it off your hands, and rather than going to zero, it's going negative, and so literally people are being paid $11 a barrel to take oil off of people's hands temporarily. Quite crazy. I don't think the price at the pump will drop all that much. This is more of a technical thing, but folks, gas prices are cheap, and they're going to stay cheap for a while, but who can go anywhere these days anyway? Alrighty, let me talk to you about how cruise lines are trying to survive in this wild and wacky world of ours. From January the 22nd on, 3 months ago, as soon as it became apparent that Asia was the epicenter of a new virus and it was starting to spread, the cruise lines immediately made changes. They weren't waiting around. They immediately figured out that certain ports of call were being closed or going to be closed. There would be restrictions on the comings and goings of passengers and providers to the cruise lines of material. And so cruise lines started to alter their sailings literally mid-cruise. Cruises that were underway now immediately were saying to their passengers, sorry folks, we're not going to Shanghai, we're going to go to another port instead, or we're not going to this port, we're going to that port, and we'll keep you posted. Then as the events kept on going, a few days later, cruise lines started to change future cruises. They started to announce the ship that is here in Asia, the next 3-4 cruises we're going to do, we're changing those itineraries completely. And then they started to cancel those sailings completely because they realized, oh my gosh, we're going to be down here for a while, and we may as well end this region right away. And within a few weeks, cruise lines literally ended their cruises, offloaded their passengers, and then moved their ships right out of Asia entirely. I know a couple of cases in point would be Royal Caribbean. They moved the Spectrum of the Seas to Australia, as example, right out of the Asia market. Luckily, a lot of the cruise lines did not have passengers on board when this occurred, but unfortunately for Princess Cruises, they were in the middle of a 14-day cruise with the Diamond Princess, and they did have passengers begin to display symptoms of the virus, and the ship ended up in Yokohama, Japan, and we all heard how that turned out very badly once the Japanese health authorities took over and basically put the ship on a quarantine, and a lot of people were held up for a long, long time. Many were quarantined and got out without ever catching the virus. A number of people caught the virus, had to be hospitalized in Japan, and then were allowed home after they recovered. And unfortunately, a number of passengers passed away because they caught the virus and could not shake it, even with hospital assistance. Cruise lines also, at the same time in early February, began new screening rules. There were new procedures announced. If you had traveled, for example, into China in the last 30 days, you couldn't take a cruise. Then the news came out that if you were 70 and older, some cruise lines wanted a doctor's note. It just got more and more restrictive. The cruise lines, though, began to allow a more liberal refund policies or future cruise credit policies. They started to come out and say, look, if your cruise is within the next 30 days, you can get a full refund. You don't have to worry about the losing your money, and we'll offer you a future cruise credit. They tried to become as flexible as quickly as they could, as did the airlines. But then it got to the point in late February that the cruise lines realized we have to shut this down, and they didn't just shut down Asia, they shut down their entire worldwide operations. And so all cruise lines around the world, including river cruise lines in Europe and China, they all shut down their operations, and they started to basically end their cruises. And of course the media jumped all over this. Wherever there was a ship in trouble or a ship at sea that couldn't get into a port, it became a worldwide story, where in reality of the 400 plus cruise ships out there, over 400 of them quickly within a few days were at port. They offloaded their passengers, no issues, no problems. People made it home, and all was well. But unfortunately, and rightly so, I am guilty of the same thing. I covered cruise ships that were stuck at sea and were having difficulty coming to port right up until just the last week or so, when the ships were brought into the Fort Lauderdale port to disembark the last of their passengers. At this point in time, though, the cruise line management people realized that we have ourselves an issue here. Never before have all of us had to shut down operations for every single ship we own. These cruise lines were placed into an impossible position of survival. And immediately, the big three publicly traded cruise lines immediately went to their debt market facilities to raise cash right now. And I covered the story about how Royal Caribbean raised billions, Norwegian raised billions, as did Carnival. Various types of equity offerings and bond offerings were offered. Standby credit financings and facilities were tapped, and the cruise lines immediately raised enough money for the next 6 months to a year to basically work their way through. The hope was by the cruise lines that they would be able to go for 30 or 60 days and then get back to business again, and the cash would start rolling in through the front door. Unfortunately, by the time March rolled around, that became obvious that it wasn't going to happen that quickly. The virus was now sweeping across Europe into the U.S. and North America, and more and more countries were reporting more and more cases of the virus, and of course fatalities and everything else. Cruise lines really started to button down after that. They realized that they're not going to be back in March. Then they figured out they're not going to be back in April. They're not going to be sailing in May, and so they decided we've got to cut costs everywhere we can as quickly as we can while we raise cash. And the way to do that, of course, is you delay and postpone refurbishments. And so virtually every ship refurbishment has been delayed, except for maybe one or two or three. New deliveries of cruise ships are delayed as it is because cruise lines depend on shipyards to build ships, and shipyards in Europe and elsewhere are shut down, even in Asia, because of the virus. So new ship deliveries are behind schedule. And then the thinking was, well, we'll reduce our crew size because every month we have anywhere from 10 to 15% of our crew, their contracts expire. Cruise lines have 10% of the cruise contracts expire, but another new 10% come on board. And so they, of course, canceled all new hires for those who were hoping to start working in April, May, June, and July on their new contracts. Those were all canceled. And as old contracts expired, cruise lines began making arrangements to repatriate crew members back home rather than to send them home for a month and re-employ them. Then the next step was let us reduce head office staff. I know Norwegian went to a 4-day work week from a 5-day work week. Everyone now is on a 20% pay cut. Crews were being, as I said, sent home. Senior executives started taking their own pay cuts. And then we've heard in the last 2 weeks now, crews are being sent home in even greater numbers, but because of travel restrictions and new CDC rules, cruise lines cannot even fly their people home unless they have private air charters set up for them. And because the numbers are so dramatic, and now the thinking is that the best way to do this is to get massive amounts of crew members home, because now they know they're not going to cruise until probably June or July at the very earliest. Why don't we just sail them home? It's cheaper to literally take one of the cruise ships in the fleet, grab 3 other ships, and transfer crew from the 3 ships to the 1 ship and sail 3,000 crew members back to either the Philippines, Indonesia, China, Vietnam, India, wherever they're from, Malaysia and so on, because you can do it in bulk. And that's what's happening. Cruise lines, in the case of Carnival, they're using 8 of their cruise ships right now to take people home and get them back to their families. Now, cruise lines stood up at the very beginning of all of this back in February and March, and they told all their crew members, whether you have passengers on board or not, you're going to be paid, and they've been honoring that. They've also honored clauses such as, or they made statements such as, after your contract is over, we're going to pay you for an additional 30 days, even if you're home or not, and we're going to get you home. And now they are doing just that. The cruise lines are sailing home thousands, probably tens of thousands of crew members across the board. I know that over at Royal Caribbean, the total workforce topped out at over 85,000 people. The workforce over at Norwegian is in excess of 30+ thousand employees. And these cruise lines, they want to get down to maybe... oh gosh, I bet you'll be down to 5,000 or 10,000 employees only by the time it's all said and done, because they've got to cut costs. The cruise lines have also been trying to compensate and encourage their passengers. First of all, let me talk about the passengers. They're trying to say to all their passengers, look, folks, we are canceling cruises. We're sorry we have to do it, but we're prepared to offer you either a full refund in cash, or you can take a future cruise credit, which is an enhanced offer. So it might be you paid for every $1 you've paid us for a cruise, we'll give you $1.25 in future cruise credit, or for every cruise that you rebook with us in the next month or so, good for the next 2 years, we'll not only give you 125% credit or 100% credit, we'll also give you an on-board credit of a certain dollar amount. I know that Carnival has been offering up to $600 cash credits on board their ships to spend any way you please when your cruise is ultimately taken. Now, for the travel agencies, all the travel agents out there, these cruise lines depend heavily on travel agents that either work for standalone type entities that literally have locations in strip malls and that type of thing, or they have a lot of their travel agents who work out of their homes as independent agents that work underneath a mother agency. And the cruise lines know exactly where their cruise business comes from, and they are trying to encourage their commissioned travel agents out there not to give up hope and to keep working with the cruise lines, because right now, if you're a travel agent, you're getting calls of people who are concerned about their potential cruise coming up, whether it's going to happen or not, or they're getting calls from people who've had cruises already canceled, one or more, and they want to know what to do next. And these people are invaluable for the cruise lines because they can convey the latest information from the cruise line to their clients on the spot, over the phone, in a personal way, and they can also assist them in the rebooking of a cruise going forward. Now, the cruise lines have said to the cruise agencies, look, if you are booking future cruise credits forward, you're going to book a cruise under that circumstance, or you're bringing in a new booking with new cash, you will earn a commission whether the cruise happens or not. Now, this shows the travel agents, look, if you're working to assist these people in finding a cruise, finding a ship, finding an itinerary, figuring out which cabin to get, working all the logistics, you're doing all that effort. We don't want you working for free because the cruise could be canceled, say, a month or 2 or 3 from now. You may not be so motivated to do all this effort. We will pay you a commission even if these sailings don't take place. In effect, the cruise line is saying, hey, if it's a new cruiser and they're making a booking and they're sending $2,000 to the cruise line for the cruise, we don't mind paying you a percentage of that, even if we have to give that $2,000 back down the road. And this is a commitment from the cruise lines to their travel agency and the army of travel agents out there to show them that we're standing with you through thick and thin so that you can still earn a living doing the work you're doing now, because you are working now. We will pay you for your time and your effort, even though these cruises may or may not happen down the road. I think that's a stand-up thing to do by the cruise lines. I think it's a quite wise thing to do by the cruise lines, because at the end of the day, cash in the cruise line's bank account for future cruising is capital that they can use now to take care of bills and get things up and running. Cruise lines, of course, know how much money they have outstanding with respect to deposits and how much cash they have on hand that's actually their actual cash, and that is why cruise lines are constantly looking to raise capital to keep that balance sheet padded as much as humanly possible. So that in theory, if every person who's booked a cruise decided within a couple of days to just seek a cash refund, the cruise lines could pay out the entire cash refunds and still have money left over in their bank accounts. That is the ultimate long-term game for all of these cruise companies, especially the public ones, of course, and private ones, obviously. Things that are also happening right now, new offerings are being made by the cruise lines in the form of freebies. The folks over at Norwegian have been offering the 5 free at sea deal on any cabin you book, so you can get free Wi-Fi, free specialty dining, free drink packages, free shore excursions, and all these freebies. More of that should be expected by all of us. Other changes, for example, Holland America canceled all of Alaska's cruises for 2020 and have notified all of their clients that they can rebook if they want for 2021 or 2022 with all kinds of enhanced credits and discounts. Fewer ships are going to sail going forward, even when the cruise lines do come back, because the cruise lines, when they come back, and they will start selling again, they want their ships full and they don't want to have an overall glut of cabins out there. They want to make money right off the get-go. So, in the case of Holland America, for example, or Norwegian, I know Norwegian for a fact, they've reduced the number of ships available for certain areas, including Alaska. Whether all cruise lines cancel Alaska this year, we'll find out, but Canada has effectively said there will be no cruises through their ports until at least July 1, 2020, and that can be extended at any time. Last couple things I'll mention. As I did say earlier, the cruise lines have cut back U.S. staff even further. Royal Caribbean just the other day announced that 26% of all of their U.S.-based employees are now going to be laid off or furloughed. The top executives of Royal Caribbean have taken either full pay cuts or partial pay cuts as well. And the latest news now that's coming out of the stock market is there's a strong possibility that the smallest of the publicly traded cruise lines, which is Norwegian, might be in play. It might be such that what might happen here is Norwegian might be a company that could either be taken over or could have an investor make such an investment into the entity that they in effect would be the controlling shareholder of the company. Norwegian is one of those cruise lines that is in effect without an owner. The company is owned by shareholders in the public markets, but the largest shareholders of the company are actually mutual funds that represent a lot of investors out there. And no mutual fund runs cruise ship lines. And so the company used to have some people who owned it and ran it, but they've long since sold out after the company went public many years ago. And now the company is held in effect by pension funds, mutual funds for long-term investment purposes. But if the company wants to raise a couple of $1 billion in cash, and they want to do it by way of a stock offering, the shares are so low now that more shares have to be sold in the open market than exist. In effect, a buyer could come in and say, "Yeah, I'll give you $1 billion at $5 a share, even though the stock's at 12. But here's $1 billion interest-free. Sell me 200 million shares for the privilege." And the next thing you know, that individual now owns 30+% of the entire corporation or more. And that means that person is a controlling shareholder. In effect, they now own and run the company, can hire and fire anyone they want because they've got the votes on the shareholder side to make changes. If the company were to, however, go and raise money from a bond offering, which is what Carnival did a couple of weeks ago, they might find themselves in worse shape than Carnival did. They might have to offer 20% interest, 15% interest on a bond just to raise a couple of $1 billion. Well, you raise $1 billion at 20% interest, you got to pay $200 million a year in interest. Where are you going to pay that if you don't have any money coming in the front door from passengers? And how would you like to have that saddled around your neck going forward? The company makes $500 million 2 years from now in an entire year. $200 million of that $500 million goes to just one lender. Not a very good looking balance sheet situation to have. So the company is up against it right now. Well, we'll have to see what comes of it. But there you are, folks, a whole bunch of things that cruise lines have done to try to guarantee their survival. I think they're looking at least a 6 months to a 1 year shutdown to be realistic. Unfortunately, as cheap as gas and oil is, that futures contract I was telling you about is now negative $25 a share, $25 a barrel, excuse me. As cheap as oil is, you can't sail anywhere unless you have passengers paying you to do it. And you can't get a cruise ship filled up anywhere because no port will allow passengers to travel there and cruise ships to do their business anyway. So we're shut down for now. We'll stay on top of this story as we go forward. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for your support of my channel, subscribing to Traveling with Bruce. Thank you for the thumbs ups and your comments. I do appreciate it. Thank you for joining me on my Facebook group page and my Instagram page as well. We're having a lot of fun staying on top of these stories. Again, folks, stay warm, stay safe, stay healthy. We'll keep you posted on what's happening. We'll talk to you again. Bye for now.